Now we can start with the panel session, and we will have 20 minutes of panel session, or maybe just a bit more if the participants would like so that we extend it a bit. How it will work like is that in the panel session, we have representatives from different industry stakeholders. We have Marie Knutsen-Oy. She is Vice President of Energy Solutions and EINRIDE. We have Mr. Andrea Condotta. He is Director of Public Affairs, Innovation and Sustainability at GRUBER Logistics, and also Alice Vice Chair. And we have David Cebon, previously introduced to you. So what will happen is that I will share the Q&A session from Slido. I see that there are already some questions from the participants. And by scanning the QR code, you can add new questions, and we will take them according to the time or even after the webinar if needed. So the first question that I see is, will measuring and reporting transport emissions move from voluntary to obligatory schemes due to new legislative files? So I don't know, it's an open floor for who would like to take this part of the question from the panel. Yes, Andrea?
Just to break the ice. Indeed, not fully sure about how to reply on this question. If we look at the postponement, let's say, of the compulsory elaboration of the sustainability report, so that kind of postponement is not, to me, a good sign, especially for the companies that have already provided that kind of reports. They force, let's say, themselves in order to be aligned with that kind of standard investing and in being able to report in a certain kind of way. And then you have from the legislative point of view a postponement. So it means that if you don't do your homework, in a way, at the end of the day, you are in a safe side. So I don't think that right now there is a kind of really strict, compulsory obligation, let's say, in reporting emissions. It will not be in the next future. At least for all the companies, it will not be in the next future. And I don't see any kind of real development, just postponement in that kind of condition. Nonetheless, from the market point of view, we as a company are more and more requested to provide emissions reporting. So if we consider our own experience, some years ago, something like 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't have any kind of methodology in place in order to report emissions. Right now, we have our own tool in order to report emissions. It is certified by GLEC. We certified also the quantities of the different fuels that we purchased in order to avoid double counting and to be more reliable to our customers. And these kind of elements are not actually based on any kind of obligations deriving from the policy point of view. But all kind of development that we are implementing are in a way deriving from the push coming from the market in our idea to be, let's say, known for our reliability in providing accounting of emissions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Andrea, for your answer to it and also for breaking the ice with the questions. Then perhaps the second question as well, it's relatable to you and perhaps to Marie as well. Is it really possible to bring CO2 emissions for electric vehicles down to zero? Yes, Marie, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I mean, depending on kind of the perspective you're taking on this, but as we see it today, if we are charging with renewable energy, we are getting quite close to it. So I would say that I'm positive towards it, but you always have the life cycle, and as we've seen here today, there is a lot of different losses and emissions to take into account. But kind of moving towards renewable energy and fossil-free energy, we are getting at least quite close to it, I would say.
Yes, Andrea?
Tricky question indeed, because I think that there is not a real alignment if we consider the guidelines provided by GHG protocol on that. Since looking at the GHG protocol, you should report your emissions deriving from electric vehicles using allocation-based methodology. So let's say using the energy mix of the place where you are operating the vehicles. So the average in terms of emission reduction should be something like 35% from a well-to-wheel perspective. So in order to overcome this kind of difficulties, also recalling what Marie said, you should use a market-based methodology, which is, let's say, mentioned in the ISO. It's not mentioned in the GHG protocol. So in that framework, and also, let's say, the ISO mentioned that you should report the location-based calculation as well as the market-based calculation. The market-based calculation is I'm buying green energy for my vehicle, so I'm reporting, let's say, zero emissions or close to zero emissions. So I think here it's more a matter of alignment in terms of policies, protocols, and standards. Since obviously, if I'm buying electric vehicles, or if I'm using an electric vehicles, or if I'm a shipper and buying a service provided with electric vehicles, my expectation is to bring emissions close to zero or zero emissions. So that's why I think from the GHG protocol there should be kind of evolution on that. I know that there is also a consultation on this matter ongoing. So I think there will not be, issues in reporting in the future zero emissions vehicles, but for the moment some gray areas are still on the table.
Yes, David, would you like to?
Sure. I mean, I think the important thing is that if you use an electric vehicle, then the emissions are essentially governed by the cleanliness of the electricity source. So as the electricity grid becomes cleaner, then so the vehicles get cleaner, and at the end, you know, if the electricity grid is completely clean, then vehicles are essentially zero emissions. That's the basic principle that's operating here. What that means is, as I mentioned, with the hydrogen powered vehicles, they use 3 times more electricity. So if they also use grid electricity, then per kilowatt hour of electricity of vehicle energy used, the hydrogen vehicle generates 3 times more carbon emissions because it uses 3 times more electricity has to be generated, has to be used. So the more efficient your vehicle is, the better. But the fundamental point is that if the electricity grid gets clean, then anyone who's using an electric vehicle is going to be essentially zero emissions. And that's the basic principle, right? We can do all the calculations, you know, all those detailed calculations, but we're fundamentally relying on electricity grid to get clean.
Yeah, and I see that Marty would like maybe to jump again in the discussion. Please, Marty.
Yes, but I think also meanwhile we're waiting for all the electricity in the grid to be clean. It's also important that we use the tools that are available with buying electricity in case we have, since we are kind of managing our charging station, and when we can, we are focusing and for the tools that are available through RECs and guarantees of origin, and buying it from the suppliers, because then we are at least adding the additional demand for this type of energy, and then we're driving it. So I think using the tools, even though they're not perfect, they can always be improved, but at least then we're not just taking the electricity mix that is available, then we are also a bit of control of steering this journey to meet the zero emission for the fleets that we have, if we have the possibility to do so.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marie. Then, based on the popularity, then we can move to the next question. I think this is related to the presentation of David. We hear that battery swapping is fairly common in China. So what are the differences that influence the different choices between Europe and China?
Well, that's a good question. Battery swapping is not that popular in China. It's being talked about a lot, and there is certainly an initiative going on, but they're not as well advanced as we might think. The first thing is that every battery swapping station in China, I'm told, costs about £10 million, and that's an additional cost that somebody has to add to the cost of the activity. When you use battery swapping, it takes additional batteries. The battery is the most expensive part of the vehicle, and if you've got to have something like 1.3 or 1.4 batteries per vehicle, that adds to the cost. Furthermore, it's not a simple matter to make batteries swap. It's not just a matter of having two batteries that can fit on the same mounting point. You've also got to have interoperable cooling systems. For example, the cooling system in the battery's got to be interoperable with the cooling system on the truck. You have to have interoperable battery management systems. Battery management system and inverter on the vehicle has got to be compatible with the battery. You have to have interoperable communication systems. Now, all of those things, those three things that I mentioned, they are what you might call secret sauce for the heavy vehicle manufacturers. It's important intellectual property for them, and it's not stuff that they're willing to share quickly and easily. So whereas it may be possible for China to mandate that vehicle OEMs have to share the kind of information that I've mentioned, it's pretty unlikely in Europe, and the message that I get when talking to OEMs is that they're not at all in favour of battery swapping in European trucks. So it's more expensive, certainly to operate, and it's the OEMs don't favour it, and I just think it's pretty unlikely. I haven't given up on it completely, but I think it's pretty unlikely that we'll see significant battery swapping in Europe.
Mm-hmm. And Andrea, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I would say that I would love to see more, let's say, research on that, to be honest. But actually, I see also from ESEA that kind of strong opposition on that, since in order to do it in an extensive way, you should have, as David mentioned, imposition in terms of standardization and sharing of information among the manufacturers and staying on what the ESEA has communicated. That's not what they want to do, for sure. To add another critical element on the matter is that it poses serious problems in terms of security. So you have a great value in the battery, as David mentioned. So it means that if you make a battery easy to extract from the vehicle, that is something very, really dangerous for especially for the drivers that will drive those kind of vehicles. They will be exposed, let's say. And also the place where you will storage all the batteries, the kind of amount of batteries that you need in order to make effective the battery swapping, will be certain kind of banks in which you have a lot of batteries there. And so something that should be really protected in order to avoid security lacking, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Please, Marie, would you like to add something?
Yes, I mean, since we are operating our own vehicles, we operate our charging infrastructure. This would be, I mean, we have very much use of the telematics from the vehicles. So, and also, I mean, knowing a lot about the battery and how to utilize it the best way you can. So it might be a good kind of easy, or not easy, but a first step for passenger cars. But I mean, we are also trying to utilize batteries from phased out vehicles to create battery energy storage, and then just getting the same type and as David mentioned, the BMS and stuff like that to actually get them to communicate together is something that is the IPO of the companies that even though in the afterlife of the battery it could be used. But interesting to, as Andrea is saying, to get more research on it. But for the time being, it's an asset for us as well.
Which, by the way, if I may add, since you mentioned let's say the people mobility, if you speak about it with the European Commission is also against, because the research done in the framework of people mobility has practically failed in order to produce concrete results, since you don't see right now on the market cars with swapping of batteries. So when I'm also vice president of 2.0, we discussed the topic in having swap batteries research projects, and they were totally against it, since they spend a lot of money in research for cars with no results, and so they don't want to repeat, let's say, the game.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to Marie and David. Then let's continue with the next question. The most voted one is, how accurate are vector models compared to actual energy consumption in actual operations? I think this relates to George's presentation, so please, George's, you can take part and answer this question, and of course the other speakers can jump in as well.
Yes, the question is about accuracy of vector model, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the simple answer to this is the more accurate the input data you provide to the vector, the more accurate the outcome is going to be. Obviously, a critical element in vector modeling, but I wouldn't really limit this to vector. I would say to any other model, is the so-called fuel consumption map. So, and this is information that is not publicly available. It is proprietary to OEMs, and obviously they are not happy to share. So, what we and the other people using vector do is, you start with some sort of generic fuel consumption map, and then you try to calibrate based on some data that you have from actual measurements or from from other databases. So other than this, I guess the rest is very simple and straightforward. You need to provide all the technical specifications of the vehicle, the trailer, the tractor and the trailer, including among other things, frontal area, gearbox, brakes, tires, and everything, all the technical details that are needed to make the simulation.
Mm-hmm. And David, would you like to jump in?
Yes, well, simulation is interesting. Simulations are only as accurate as the data that you compare them against. But if you have a vehicle simulation, if you put a driver into an electric vehicle, a good driver can drive with 20% longer range than a bad driver. So
Yes.
there's 20% difference in energy consumption just based on what the driver does. There's a huge difference based on the weather. If it's windy, for example, vehicles use a lot more fuel. If it rains, then the rolling resistance goes up. If there's traffic, the starting and stopping. So the operating conditions which are driving which you have to put into the simulation, there's all kinds of uncertainty. And there's easily, 20 or 30% uncertainty in the operating conditions. So if you ask the question, how accurate is it? It might be super accurate when compared to the exact data it was calibrated against. But once you actually say what is my state of charge going to be when I get to that point, and you have to predict the traffic levels, and you have to predict the effects of the wind or the rain, you have to predict the effect of the driver, and you don't know any of them, then it's not accurate at all. Well, I mean, it's accurate, but it's not nearly as accurate as the data it was calibrated and validated against. And that's the fundamental point. There's a huge amount of uncertainty in all this. Often we don't know what the payload of the vehicle is. And if you don't know what the payload of the vehicle is, you have no chance of predicting the energy consumption. So, you need to know all those things, and you need to boil all that uncertainty down to a level where, you've got an accurate model of the particular driver, the traffic conditions, the weather conditions. And if you can do all of that, then you can make it very accurate. But otherwise, you need to be plus or minus 10% is pretty damn good.
Please, Andrea.
Yeah, if I can bring something from our direct experience, our model for calculating, let's say, the potential range of a vehicle is not starting, let's say, from vector, since it is based on a practical experience. So we started from the practical experience since we noticed all the elements that can contribute in order to change the range of the vehicles. So it is, practically speaking, based on the single transformation, the single path, considering topography, different level of temperatures in that specific areas that can impact quite strongly the vehicles. Let's say the different level of efficiency that our drivers have shown in the past experiences that we manage with electric vehicles. So when we do simulations, our system is basically based on direct experience. The reason why also we were not, let's say, trusting too much about, in a way, manufacturing information that we had. It was also because we noticed some elements that impacted quite a lot our operational activity that were not clear at the very beginning. So one of the elements, for instance, is that you have a certain kind of kilowatt hour that are installed in the vehicle, but on practical terms, you cannot use all those kind of batteries. So this is one of the experience that we had in the field that was not communicated from the manufacturers. So for instance, you can have 540 kilowatt hours installed, but maybe you can use just the 65%. And that was not communicated before. One of the other elements that impacted us, also in terms of costs, was the joule effect that was mentioned in terms of calculation of emission, in terms of losses of the energy. So we were paying more than what we were expecting to pay. So also in that case, the impact was quite relevant for us. Tarsis mentioned something like going from 3 to 10%. We got also in some charging stations a difference of 11% in terms of costs. So the impact was quite relevant for us in terms of operation and cost. That's why we are using our own model in order to make the calculation in terms of TCO and operation reliability of the vehicles.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrea. And unfortunately, I will have to close the panel session.